Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Western Suburbs or Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. This is Josh Welge. I'm here with Joel Boenitz. Joel, it's July 17th. We're taping this on a Thursday afternoon. I believe, if Edgy Tim is accurate, it's 43 days until the first Football Friday. He counts it down. We're about 6 weeks away. How you feeling? We're getting pretty close.
Yeah, I mean it's feeling a lot more like football season. I mean, we're seeing a lot of 7-on-7s happening. I mean, last week I was at Battle of the Big Butts, obviously one of the bigger 7-on-7 events that happens here in Illinois. So it's really feeling like, football season is really coming alive now. So
Yeah, it
it's
really is.
pretty exciting times.
We can only hope that this season will be as exciting as last season that ended with, I think we had local teams in every game of the last day of the season last year. So hopefully it'll be just like that. And I know it's in July, but we're kind of reaching a point in the calendar that becomes kind of where it starts to get a little bit realistic that season's coming. The IHSA releases the official schedule for football on Friday, and us at Friday Night Drive, we are going to have wall-to-wall coverage on that. We're going to have week-by-week breakdowns for every market that we cover of the games that we're looking forward to. Steve Susi has a couple analysis pieces lined up that I was able to read this morning, so that's going to be pretty exciting. And then it's going to be 4 podcasts coming people's way if they're into the podcast game. Joel and I, of course, taping. Seuss and I doing kind of an overview type piece podcast, and then Seuss and Mason Schweizer from our Kankakee newspaper. They jumped on for a podcast about that neck of the woods, and then JT Petalty, Eddie Carriffio, and Sam Ramirez with their South and West podcasts looking at DeKalb County and Sauk Valley area and the Illinois Valley. So a lot of stuff coming your way. If you're into football in July, Friday Night Drive is the place to go. So, but yeah, no, we just wanted to, Joel, today wanted to maybe first start off by looking at some of the, kind of new matchups, particularly early in the year, that kind of excited me and excited you as we looked at them, and we kind of had a little bit of sneak preview. We have, the thing is that the official release is tomorrow on Friday, but schedules are kind of out there, so you kind of know what games are going on. It's just, not the official is tomorrow, so we do have a pretty good idea about what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to start week 1. There's some really interesting kind of new matchups that I saw, and one of the ones that really jumped out that Seuss told me it kind of came together very last minute in the last month or so of the off season as teams were scrambling to fill openings. Lyons Township is going to be at Joliet Catholic week 1. I saw that, and I think I texted Seuss like, ooh. I mean, Lyons Township, a team that they won the West Suburban Silver last year. They reached the Class 8A quarterfinals, and they are continuing to emerge as a threat in 8A, and obviously the West Suburban Silver that they won last year. Then they're going down to Joliet to play Joliet Catholic. Of course, the defending Class 5A runner-up. Really good tradition there, and just not only 2 really good programs, but 2 really good conferences, knocking heads right off the bat in week 1. So that's going to be a really fun one to watch. But Joel, I know there's a couple ones that you're looking at. One specifically I can think of.
Yeah, the big one for me that I've been keeping my eye out for is St. Charles North heading down to Minooka. Obviously, North Stars past couple of years, they've played their week 1 game against Palatine, and those games that were always really fun to watch because they always came down to, last second players, it felt like. But I mean, Minooka obviously 8-3 last season. I mean, they're coming off a pretty solid season in the Southwest Prairie. So it's going to be really interesting to see, if that week 1 game against a team like Minooka stands up to, how their week 1s have been in the previous seasons against Palatine. Obviously, I'm a little upset that I never got to see a game like that, but I'm sure, obviously St. Charles North is returning a lot of good players. Obviously, they did lose their 4-year starting quarterback in Ethan Plum, but they are still, having guys like Keaton Ranke come back, who's now committed to Northwestern. So I'm really excited to see how that game's gonna, pan out to start off the season for them.
Yeah, kind of interesting in that the Duquesne Conference and the Southwest Prairie Conference are matching up in that week 1 game. They're also matching up in week 2 in a different game. Geneva going to Oswego. That was another one that I'm like, ooh, that's kind of a fun one. Oswego's actually playing April Central week 1 at April Central. Then they have Geneva coming there, and both of those teams. I mean, Oswego was 9-0 last season in the regular season, got to the second round of the playoffs. Geneva, as we know, reached the state championship game. Those teams, both teams, I think, are going to have a little bit of different look this year. I mean, Geneva, graduates Talon Taylor, Tony Jahino. Oswego, I think they return like maybe 4 or 5 starters total, but they did have a lot of success at lower levels. So, yeah, that'd be a good one early on in the season.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be a battle of two kind of rebuilding programs this year because obviously, you kind of mentioned Oswego only returning like 4 or 5 starters. Geneva, their offense is only returning 3 starters of, their star-studded cast from last season. Their defense, a little bit less to have to build back up, but, it's going to be kind of interesting to see, how much, the younger guys that are going to be stepping up this season, it's going to be interesting to see how they step up, before they head into conference play. So,
yeah. Any other kind of new games that you see on the schedule that that jump out to you before we kind of deep dive into the week by week?
yeah, one I thought that was interesting, kind of looking similar Duquesne Conference, that somebody that you cover a lot more. Wheaton North, obviously last year, their 2 non-conference games against Providence Catholic and Lockport, those literally came down to the wire. Both of them decided by the last play against 2 pretty quality teams. They're going to have a very similar non-conference schedule. They're facing off against Simeon in week 1 and then Stevenson in week 2. Stevenson obviously went 10-2 last year. Simeon 7-4. Both really high quality programs that they're going to face off against before heading into Duquesne Conference play. And I think considering how young they were for the most part, last season, especially on offense, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys face off against teams like Simeon and Stevenson this year.
Yeah. Yeah. One more game that I did notice this morning when I was kind of combing over things is IC Catholic is playing Woodstock North in week 2. IC Catholic, obviously, they missed the playoffs last year, which they had not. It's been a long time since they have missed the playoffs. God, probably a decade or something. And I mean, obviously, they won state titles and whatnot. They're playing Woodstock North, who some people in the suburbs might not realize they had a really good year last year. They won 8 games. They got to the second round of the playoffs. I believe they have their best player, David Rendecker, fullback, coming back. So I think they're going to be a team to watch in the Kishwaukee River. We'll see how they do against IC Catholic. I feel like maybe a little bit of a step up in class a little bit to play a team from the CCL, but definitely a matchup. I think it's week 2 that I did notice, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of interesting. And I wonder how they found each other. I mean, they're kind of like in different areas, but I mean, teams, sometimes matchups come together late in the off season. I mean, I know like there's some teams that are still looking for games. A few weeks. I know Montini, the defending 3A champion, they own it as far as I know right now. I think Loyola is week 2 doesn't have an opponent right now. So I mean, we're sitting here on July 17th. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that IC Catholic Woodstock North game in week 2, I believe, was another one that stood out. So yeah, we wanted to kind of look at it week by week, and maybe each of us can give a shout out to a game that we're kind of looking forward to each week. I'll start at week 1. Joel, what is there a game that kind of like jumps off the page to you, or it's like, wow, I can't wait to see that one?
I think the big one, kind of considering, the historic programs that are facing off and kind of the game that they provided last year, Batavia and Glenbard West is always going to be one of those games that, I was going to be like, ooh, I kind of want to see how this goes. Obviously, Glenbard West is coming off of, a shocking season where they didn't make it into the playoffs. So I'm sure they're probably going to want to get off on the right foot against a team like Batavia. And obviously, Bulldogs last year, made it all the way to the state title game before losing to Mount Carmel. I know they're returning a lot of fun offensive weapons. Some maybe in different positions from what I hear. So, I'm going to be really interested to see, kind of how that kind of stacks up in that week 1 matchup there. So that one's definitely caught my eye for sure.
Yeah, Glenbard West hosted Batavia last year in Deshaun Field. The first time I think those programs have played each other, at least since their current head coaches have been there, and they've been there for a little while between Dennis Puron and Chad Hatlett. But I know Batavia won that game. It's kind of a close game, even though Batavia controlled the game, but kind of set an unfortunate tone for Glenbard West because they started the season 0-4, and they were really battling back the rest of the year, and they almost kind of snuck in the back door, but they didn't quite get there. So they want to get off to a better start to the year, but man, it will not be easy because they go to Batavia and then they play Joliet Catholic week 2. So hello, the first 2 weeks of the season before they go into their conference. So, but yeah, no, that's you and I both. I mean, we saw Glenbard West Batavia week 1. You're like, yeah, that's definitely one of the better ones in week 1. Another game that I'm looking forward to, not only because I think it might be a good game, but because it's going to be maybe the first game played in the state this year, and that's St. Francis is going to Gately Stadium on Thursday night. They're playing Kenwood, who Kenwood's had a lot of really good high-end talent the last few years. They maybe slipped maybe a touch, but I mean, you never really know what they have coming. I do know that St. Francis has a lot of talent. They have one of the best receiving corps in the state, led by Zach Washington. It's going to Michigan State. Their entire offensive line back. So, but they have a brutal schedule. I think you and I have both talked about it. So, man, they really want to get that win right off the bat. But again, Thursday night, I remember when I talked to Coach McMillan and I asked him about his schedule. He's like, "Yeah, we're playing Thursday night." I'm like, I think my first word to him was thank you or thanks, because that's the chance for us to see some football before Friday rolls around. So yeah, that should be a good one. Week 2, what are some is there a game that kind of stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, last year this game was kind of a blowout in my eyes, or well, not in my eyes. I saw it firsthand. But this year, I think it's going to be really interesting. Especially considering some of the talent that the losing team has added to their side. I'm talking about Batavia and South Elgin. I mean, obviously, South Elgin has Gavin Mueller coming in now, Colorado commit. Coming in at tight end for them, so that adds a lot to that potent offense. And I think also on top of that, Batavia lost a lot on the defensive side to graduation. I mean, talking about Chase Osborne, who was, literally everywhere, almost every single game for them. Josh Pally also in the backfield. They lost a lot up front as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, it's going to be a big test for that new defense heading into this game. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, kind of how that dynamic is, especially facing off against somebody as talented on the field as Gavin Mueller. So,
yeah. Well, you mentioned South Elgin coming out of the Upstate 8. Another matchup I'm looking forward to is week 2 is 2 other very good teams from that league. It's Glenbard East and West Aurora. I believe they won their respective divisions in the conference last year. They did play West Aurora, beat them kind of handily by a few touchdowns. But I mean, it's 2 of the teams that are going to be the best in that league. I expect both to get to the playoffs. They both went last year. I think West Aurora went 9-0 during the regular season. I think they both might have reached the second round of playoffs, but that'll be a nice little game, early in the year. Kind of gets an idea about where those teams are at. Week 3, what do you think?
Week 3, I think it's the matchup that decided part of the Duquesne Conference last year. St. Charles North versus Geneva. They're going to be heading to, St. Charles North for this game. Obviously, 2 kind of different programs heading into this. I mean, obviously, we kind of mentioned it. Geneva's going to be on the rebuilding side on the offense. Meanwhile, St. Charles North on the other side, they're returning a good majority of their offense, besides, of course, Ethan Plum. But from what I hear, they have plenty of options in the back or in that backfield to fill in that position. So, it's going to be really interesting to see, what the dynamic is going to be between these 2 returning co-Duquesne Conference champions. So, I'm really interested to see how this game pans out.
So I'm going to cheat for week 3. And I'm going to pick 2 games because one of them is wow is Mount Carmel playing Nazareth at Nazareth. Mount Carmel defending 7A champs, or Nazareth defending 5A champs. They're both going to be, moved up a class this year to 8A and 6A, assuming they reach the playoffs. But obviously two of the just two of the great programs in the state. Nazareth did graduate a lot of really good seniors from last year's team, but man, I mean, I still expect them to be good. Mount Carmel, my goodness, they have so many like high major Division I recruits in that team. It's really scary, the talent that they've assembled for this team, on this team this year. So those two teams are playing, Mount Carmel and Nazareth. Coincidentally, I saw on the schedule, I believe it's Nazareth's only home game in the first 5 weeks of the season. So they're going to be on the road quite a bit, starting with they're going to Kankakee week 1.
Mhm.
So that should be a matchup that everybody's attention is going to be on. And then the other one, at least in Sandwich and Plano, all the attention is going to be there. Is Sandwich and Plano meeting up? Those two teams, those two schools have met on the football field since 1897. Pretty big game in those towns, and usually a pretty good game as well. Sandwich has beat them the last couple of years, but man, it's a rivalry that I think it's like 57-53 all the time. So it's really close, but everybody in those communities is going to be keeping a close eye on that one. So some good ones there. Week 4, what do you think?
I think the big one that you got to look at for week 4 is obviously St. Francis versus St. Rita. I mean, two returning, semi or state semifinal teams. Obviously, St. Francis in 5A, St. Rita in 7A this last year. I mean, two quality programs that are facing off against each other again. I think it's going to be really interesting, and it might be a little bit closer this year. So I think it's going to be a good matchup.
I feel like you could pick a St. Francis game probably 8 out of the 9 weeks. I mean, their schedule is crazy good, or crazy tough, whichever way you want to call it. But that should be a good one. Another one in the CCL, ESCC, that I got my eye on is Fenwick playing at Montini. Montini, of course, the defending Class 3A state champions. But Fenwick was the last team to beat them. Montini won the last 10 games they played, including the playoffs, but Fenwick beat them. It was a good one, too. It's 13-10, low-scoring game. Fenwick had a really good defense last year. We'll see what they look like this year, but that should be a really good one. It's one of Montini's probably, games that I'm kind of watching in their schedule. Like the last few years, I feel like if Montini can just survive the regular season and get to 5 wins or maybe 6 wins, then they're going to be a tough out once the playoff starts. But that should be a really good one. Fenwick and Montini week 4. Week 5. What games are on your map?
Well, week 5, I think, kind of sticking with the co-Duquesne Conference champion matchups, I think I got to go with St. Charles North and Batavia. I think, both of those offenses have a lot of returning talent, and I think that's going to, show on the field. Last year, game was super fun. It didn't look close for the most part or on paper, but I mean, it required a very big effort from Nathan Whitwell for Batavia to pull off that victory. I mean, 5 second half rushing touchdowns for him. He honestly could have had a 6 if they didn't put Grayson Kelly in for that play. But I think this is going to be once again a really good game with two really talented offenses, and yeah, there's a chance that this is going to determine who wins the Duquesne Conference, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, that should be a lot of fun. Again, there's a couple that I'm looking at for week 5. I'll start with, again, Nazareth. They're going to Joliet Catholic. I mean, it speaks for itself. These are two teams that have played for the state title last 2 years in 5A, and Nazareth beat them both times. They beat them last year in the regular season too. All of them were very close games. So that one should be a lot of fun. Another really good match. I mean, you could probably pick 3 or 4 games every week in the CCL, ESCC that are really good games, but that is definitely one that I'm looking at. And the other one out there in Kendall County area, Yorkville is playing Oswego, neighboring towns, kind of close rivals, friendly type rivals. But Oswego got them last year. Yorkville got them the 2 previous years. Yorkville, another team that's had a lot of success the last decade, but they missed the playoffs at 4-5 last year. So they're going to be looking to get back, and that'll be one of the games that they certainly have circled on their calendar. So So that should be a really fun, week 5 matchup. Week 6, we're already into October, or at least close to it. Maybe late September.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Well, week 6 is obviously a rivalry matchup week for Duquesne Conference. So I think it's fair to talk about one of the longest standing rivalries in the state of Illinois, Batavia and Geneva. I mean, obviously last year Geneva broke their 13-year losing streak to Dennis Piron and Batavia. But obviously we've kind of mentioned it. They're a little bit, on the rebuilding side. By week 6, they should definitely have a better idea of what their identity on offense and defense. Batavia should be the exact same way, but I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup once again. I mean, it's the 2 years that Geneva lost heading into their win, uh, they were relatively close, and I think this is going to be another game that is going to be a little bit more closer than people expect it to be. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we're definitely talking a different type of tone with that matchup after Geneva was, finally able to beat them last year, and
Hmm.
took the momentum all the way to the state championship game. But I will say, last year in week 6, I had never heard of Michael Vanderloo Agarin, and by the end of the year, I was like,
I don't think anybody did.
I think by the end of the year, I was like, I want Michael Vanderloo Agarin on my fantasy football team. So I mean, he really made a name for himself, and I think he's going to make a name for himself again this year. But yeah, no, that's definitely a matchup that everybody is going to have their eye on. Is that week 6 game? You
He's
mentioned
actually he's
you
actually
mentioned
going to have his name plate the
is
entire
he
time.
is
So
he yeah, right. Obviously, you mentioned that's sort of rivalry in Duquesne, another good one. Wheaton Warrenville South, Wheaton North. Um, another kind of there's some rivalries that I feel like teams like hate each other. I think with that matchup, they just like respect each other. I mean, they like
mhm.
grew up together and stuff, and they probably played a lot of youth football together and stuff. I just think that it's just a good rivalry that the community kind of gets around. And Wheaton North is another program. Man, I mean, they won state just a few years ago, but they were 4-5 last year, and missed
Mhm.
the playoffs. And Wheaton South was able to beat them, and they're going to be coming back. But I mean, I think they might be contenders in the Duquesne, but the way the Duquesne is and as competitive it is, they're probably going to be in that situation coming in the game like 3-2 or something like that, and needing a win, and obviously a big game like that. So that one should be a lot of fun. Week 6, again, the Duquesne Conference sort of rivalry week. Week 7, what do you think?
Week 7, I think the big one for me, talking about a team that we just kind of touched on, Wheaton Warrenville South, and Wheaton or in St. Charles North. I mean, last year that game went all the way down to the buzzer for the most part, and I think the year before that game went into overtime. But yeah, those are two teams. I think they're the only two teams in the Duquesne Conference that lost multi-year starters at quarterback. So kind of like what I mentioned, week 7, they should have a better idea of their identity on offense, especially, in that quarterback position. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see, if they can live up to the standard that they've, kind of produced in the last 2 games, or in the last 2 years, and, bring another highlight game. But I also have another one to touch on in the Duquesne Conference, another one that went into overtime last year. St. Charles East in Lake Park. I think that might also be an interesting game. St. Charles East has a really talented wide receiver room this year that's experienced for a good majority of it. So I think they're going to be really interesting in that mindset. And then Lake Park, obviously, past couple of years, they've been 1 game away from making it into the playoffs. They were 4-5 last year. They shocked Wheaton North and kept them out of the playoffs by beating them in week 9. I think they're also returning a lot of good talent on offense, and I think it should be interesting to see, if either of those teams are like really close to potentially making it to the playoffs, if that win can kind of catapult them for those final 2 games there.
Mm-hmm. So a couple games that I'm looking at, week 7, one of them York and Downers Grove North, two of the best teams in the West Suburban Silver. York obviously reached the Class 8A state championship game last year. They made the semifinals of 2 previous years, and I mean I think they're at the point in their program that this is not just a 1 or 2 year thing. They got it rolling now. I mean, and I think they're going to be really good again. And Downers Grove North, I mean, my goodness, when you have 3 kids that are committed to the Big Ten, and a quarterback, a tight end, and an offensive lineman, that's a pretty good place to start. With Owen Landstu, Will Val, a tight end, going to Illinois, and then Selecki, I believe is his last name. I forget the first name. He's an offensive lineman going to Purdue, but that'll be one of the better games in the West Suburban Silver this year. York and Downers Grove North, and then the other one, Oswego Minooka. And I feel like the last probably 10 years in the Southwest Prairie, that's going to, in the Western Division, that's like maybe one of the games to watch. And I think it will be again. Minooka has probably as much talent or at least experience back in that league as anyone. And Oswego, the road to the title in that league usually goes through Oswego. So that's going to be another game in week 7 that I'm watching. Week 8, what game stands out to you?
I think the big one for me is Wheaton North and Geneva. I think that's going to be the big one. Geneva's going to be heading over to Wheaton for that game. Last year when these two teams faced off, Wheaton North looked like they had a chance to hand Geneva, their first loss of the season. But some unfortunate plays that happened in the red zone with less than a minute left led to Geneva holding on for the win. I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think considering how late it is in the season and how kind of questionable these two teams might be, there may be a chance that this might be a game that determines if there's a chance that they can make it to the playoffs or not. So I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup for both of these teams.
For me, I think I got to go with the Oswego East crosstown rivalry game.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 21st time that these two teams have played each other. Oswego's won 18 of the first 20 games. They got them last year, which kept Oswego East out of the playoffs and also finish off a 9-0 regular season. So again, I mean, it's a matchup that the community looks forward to every year. Obviously, Oswego's had the upper hand for the most part, but in the last 5 years, Oswego East has won two of the games. So Oswego East is going to be a team that's looking to get back to the playoffs. They've missed the last 2 years after they were kind of a regular for the decade previous to that. But yeah, I mean that's always a game that you kind of circle on the calendar, and it being that late in the season, I'm sure the significance will be pretty high. Week 9, what do you think?
Josh, I think we both know what game we're going to be talking about with this one. Yeah, we're going to pick the same game. We're going to pick St. Francis versus Nazareth again. So yeah.
I mean, that's the game. I mean, well, they've played each other the last 2 years in the regular season and in the playoffs. They won't this year with Nazareth moving up to 6A. But yeah, I'm sure there'd be quite a few fireworks in that game. What do you think about that one?
I mean, maybe just a few. That's my guess. I mean, obviously, last 2 years, St. Francis beat Nazareth in the regular season and then lost to them in the playoffs. But I mean, obviously, we've kind of touched on it. St. Francis has one of the best receiving cores in the state. I mean, Nazareth is always a really good program when it comes to that. So I think it's going to be, once again, it's going to be a really fun matchup with a lot of fireworks, and maybe some not nice things will be said in the game between the two teams.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of edge to that rivalry.
Maybe just a little bit.
A little bit of an edge to that rivalry. So yeah, a lot to look forward to. This has been a lot of fun breaking it down again. Everybody out there, check out all the other podcasts that we have coming this week. Check out the content. We obviously the season's fast approaching. We'll be publishing our Friday Night Drive preview magazine coming out in August. So, check out that one as well. We'll have full previews coming. And then once the season starts, we'll be back at it with previews, features. Joel and I will be breaking it down every week with other podcasts as well. Seuss will be back with Matt Rodewald on their Friday Night Live Friday night show. So a lot of good stuff coming. Joel, before we get out of here, any parting comments?
Excited to see you guys again in 6 weeks.
Definitely. Very, very excited. Again, for Joe Boenitz, this is Josh Welge. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll see you soon.